Welcome to Shift, a college admissions ACT, SAT, and CLT podcast for a changing world. I'm Tyler, the founder of Achievable, and we have affordable ACT and CLT courses that include everything you need to ace your exam. A full textbook, tons of review questions backed by our memory enhancing algorithm, videos on key topics, a built in study planner, and full length practice exams. You can get a free trial at achievable.me, and if you like it, the code podcast gets you 10% off. Now, let's get started. Today we've got Kevin Krebs from HelloCollege with us. And Kevin, I'd love if you could introduce yourself and your company.
Well, thank you so much, Tyler. It's a pleasure to be here today. Once again, as you said, my name is Kevin Krebs. I'm the founder and managing director of a company called HelloCollege, which I started 14 years ago. And we try to successfully help families navigate the college admissions journey. So that could be everything from curriculum selection, activities development, test prep, applications, essays, financial aid, and scholarships. The goal is maximize their odds of admissions and scholarship success and minimize their stress.
That's great. Yeah, then you're a great person for our topic today, naturally, which is both how to find your best fit college and then get in.
Yep.
And I think to start this conversation off, can we talk about what best fit actually means today?
One
Because
one
I
hundred
feel
percent.
like that word is thrown around all over the place and it's just, it feels like a vibe thing, right? Oh, I just liked it there. That was my best fit. But is that really true? And kind of what should both parents and students be thinking about?
I think when I started the company, I started doing a lot of research, and the stats are just incredibly bad. 37% of kids transfer, 80% of kids change their major, only 24% of kids in the United States graduate in 4 years, 40% of kids who start college never finish. And I think it all starts with the fit. And rather than who's playing on ESPN tonight, who's got the best, sororities on TikTok, all of the crazy reasons kids pick colleges, I wanted to come up with a system that could help families just better understand the key factors that should go into making the best college list. So we actually came up with an acronym, Tyler. We call it SAFE, the four fits to develop a great college list. The S stands for social fit. How big, how far, what's the culture of the school? Is the student going to feel comfortable there? Do they want an urban setting? Do they want a college town? Do they want to commute? Do they want to get as far from their parents as possible? Next is the A, is the academic fit. So what do you want to study? What does the curriculum look like in your particular major? And then what are the grades and test scores that we need to get in? The third piece is the F, the financial fit. So a lot of people get caught up in the sticker price, but the reality is financial aid and scholarships can make a big difference if you know what that school's history is like for a family like yours. And then the payoff is the E, the employment fit. What do you want to do when you're done? So, what does that college do in terms of internships, job placement, recruiting, starting salaries, alumni network? And I think if you look at it as safe as like the four legs on a table, you want to have balance. And I think if you have
Mm,
that, you have a nice mix of reach, target, and safety, and you talk about those factors as a family, you're going to start off with the best foundation possible.
great. Yeah, and I think it's also, I like that you ended with talk about those factors as a family because I think it's important to involve your kid in the discussion.
100%.
Um, yeah, I can imagine that by doing so, they'll feel a lot more like they have a lot more agency in the process, which is going to help in a number of different ways.
Well, I know, having done this for the better part of 28 years and 14 since I started HelloCollege, I think some families are really enamored with bumper stickers, but that
Mm,
might not be the best fit for their kid. I also think
right.
that, as you said, getting the kid involved, part of our process is not just getting into a great college, but it's also like personal growth and accountability and learning to be proactive and to kind of initiate this process for yourself. And I tell all of our students, you should be vetting these colleges as much as they're going to vet you. This is your life, your future. This is one of the biggest decisions you ever make. So, and I'm always surprised that people start so late. I mean, they've spent more time in travel sports and all these other things. And listen, I played sports all the way through college. I get it. But what is more important than helping your kid figure out what they want to do, where they want to go, and how to help them get in and avoid debt? That should
Mhm.
be the main thing that families spend time talking about.
Great. Yeah, and that brings up a good point, or just like thing that I've been thinking about too, right? Is I think that when you're a consultant like you guys, you can steer families away from like the bumper sticker mentality, but not everybody can afford a consultant or just is using one. Or there are some consultants that are happy to chase bumper stickers too, right? It's good for their marketing. So, what if you're talking to families here today that are want to think about this in a holistic way, the way that you're suggesting, like what are the data points or sources of information that you're looking to that really matter, right? That show that ROI that you're talking about, that show like really, especially, I think like social fit is a lot of looking online and looking at like platforms like Admitsy or other things where there's like crowdsource information about the
Yep.
experience.
Right.
But for like academic, financial, and employment, I think that there's hard data, like real numbers that you can reference that are not going to be as subjective, which is better.
And looking at data is not researching the US News and World Report rankings. It takes legwork. Anything that's worth it, you have to invest time, right? So I
Mm,
mean, obviously, and look at the rankings all you want. You're looking for an engineering program or a pre-med program or a business program. Don't just look at the rankings. That's a data point. Now look at the professors, look at the curriculum. You can call the admissions office. You can find out what companies are recruiting on campus and what the starting salaries are. You can research the history of that school in terms of giving need-based aid. What percentage of kids that don't qualify for need-based aid get merit scholarships? You just have to know where to look. The hard part is there's not just one source, right? You can't just go to the company, website and say, okay, my family makes $120,000 a year. My daughter's got a 3.7 and a 31 ACT. And how's it all going to, it's not that easy because there's nuance. The admissions rates are different if you go regular decision versus early decision. The
mm,
admissions rates can differ wildly by majors. So you really, really need to understand where you're coming from. I call it the comps. What are the comps that matter to you? And then you need to dig. You need to spend time and obviously if you can DIY it, great. Obviously, I think we've got some knowledge as having done this for so long and worked with so many kids and seeing all these things on the front lines. That's where we can cut through the clutter.
mm.
We have great free resources. I mean, on our website, sayhellocollege.com, we have a ton of free resources because we know not everybody can afford to pay for a service. We do over 100 free webinars every year. So our goal is to positively impact as many families as possible. And then for families that want a little bit of an extra, hand holding and a little bit of extra expertise, we're there and we're glad to help support them.
That's great. Yeah, and I think that you're right. There's lots of different sources, and U.S. News and World Report is obviously, while it's the most famous, it has its flaws for sure. I think also sometimes it's hard to understand what these really mean. We're talking about, I think that things like acceptance rates or even just rankings can be misinterpreted, right? Or like the selectivity
1000%.
rating, right? So what advice do you have for people on how those metrics like can mislead you and then what you should do instead?
I will give you a perfect example. All right. So last year we had a student, pre-med, very, very bright young lady, wanted to, her dream school was UPenn. Her next
Hmm.
favorite school was Emory in Atlanta. I mean, both
Hmm.
fantastic schools. And the dad requested a meeting with me and he said, Kevin, what do you think? And I said, your daughter's amazing, but I think she's just a notch below UPenn. So I would not use
Hmm.
my early decision at UPenn. I said, I think if you go early decision at Emory, that's the right call. He goes, well, we were thinking the opposite. We want to try to go early decision at UPenn because it's going to help our odds. And I think we could still get into Emory. And I'm going to round the math, Tyler. And you know what early decision is, correct? It's the binding
Oh
committee.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. All
My
right. So,
cousin just got into her first choice school with early decision when I was like, I don't know if it's gonna work, and she told
yeah.
us so it does help for
And
sure.
so here's the deal. So I told the family, let me show you what happens at Emory. And I'm rounding the math for simplicity's sake. Let's say they take 2,000 kids. Last year,
Mhm.
68% of those kids, and I'm going to call it 70, 68% were early decision or early decision two. So if you go regular decision at Emory, now instead of 2,000 spots, 1,400 of those spots are gone. You have 600 left. 25% are international. Now you have 450. Now of 450, half of them are girls. Now you have 225 girls. One third of them are white. Now you got 75 white girls from the entire country.
Yeah.
And now you say, okay, how many of those are pre-med? Maybe a third. Now you have 25. So it's like people think I'm one of 2,000 when in reality, they're one of 25. I go, do you think your daughter is one of the top 25 in the entire country? And they're like, I don't know. And so that family ended up going ED to Emory instead of UPenn, and they got in. And so these are just
Great.
little things. You know, I had another family the other day. They had University of Washington in Seattle listed as a safety school for their son who wants to do computer science. And I said, that's a reach. And they're like, well, Kevin, the out of state acceptance rate for University of Washington is 51%. I go, yeah. I go, you know what it is for computer science? And they said, no. I said, 3%. I said 3% is not a safety school. 3% is a reach.
Right.
And they're like, well, where did you get that data? I go, from the UW admissions office. Here it is. And I held it up. But people, they either don't know where to find that data or they don't have access to that data.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's it's like the US News and World Report, like high level data will get interpreted as like the data for the specific program when it can vary dramatically.
100,
And so based on that, I feel obviously you need to get specific with what you're targeting, but also I think you need to like, is there more that you can do to determine whether a school is like a reach, a target, or a safety for your specific major beyond what you just said? Like, specifically for this person with this grade at point average and like this curriculum and that kind of thing, right?
I think most families are relegated to hodgepodging, just data and trying to take their best guess, right? So most schools have a software platform, whether it's Naviance or Score or anything like that, where you can see a scattergram in years past of which kids applied to which schools and their grades and test scores, who got in and who didn't. The challenge is you don't know the racial demographics, you don't know the major. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you can supplement that with setting up a meeting with the local admissions rep from that university that works with your high school and just saying, you know, on average, what were the SAT scores for the kids that got into the, you know, business program or the nursing program? And so I think that's, you know, the job of an admissions rep at a university is really like a territory sales manager. They're trying to get as many qualified applicants as possible and then cherry
Mm-hmm.
pick the one that they want, right? But their job is to really try to help you make a more well-informed decision. But most kids say, like, I didn't know that there was a person, you know, how do I get in touch with them? And so they either don't know or they're too afraid. And so, you know, we're in a unique place because we have the context. We could find out who's the Chicago area admissions rep for the University of Texas or whatever that is, because we probably know them already. But if not, you know, we can call and get that information. And guess what? Families can make that phone call.
Mm-hmm.
They just don't take that initiative. And this is where I go back. Families should be vetting these schools as much as the schools are vetting their kids. And so, but just
Yeah.
sometimes it just takes a little work. You got to roll up your sleeves and put in the time.
Yeah. Well, and I think that also it kind of what you're getting at is something that I've thought about and discussed before, which is that this idea that the family should not like I think the sort of default mode of both parents and students is please college, please take me. So it puts them in the a better word, like the sort of like you're putting the school on a pedestal. And I feel like you're really I think the whole process works a lot better and it also I think helps with kind of your tone and your approach and your essays are not like, please God, I'd love to go to UPenn. If you approach the process like a buyer, like you're buying something, right? At the end of the day, you are. paying money for an education and you're hoping for an outcome after that, right? And yeah, I think for me, I guess where I want to go next with this is I feel like the proper way to do this, and I feel like most people don't do it this way, is to start with what's your goal, which is I want to work in chemical engineering at, I don't know, some Dow Chemical, whatever it is. And then reverse engineer your way backwards. What major am I going to need? And then what schools are best for that major, like that kind of thing. Do you agree with my take on this? Do you find that's maybe I don't have kids that are in the age of college admissions and I never have, so I don't know if maybe I'm just off base here, but that's how I would do it if I had kids that age today.
Yeah, I mean, you always start with the end goal in mind and then work your way back. I always tell everybody everything in life works better when you have a plan. And if you have a plan, you know the individual steps involved, right? Like you said, okay, hey, I want to go to chemical engineering. I want to work for this company. Well, then you find out what schools does that company recruit from. Okay, do I have the grades and test scores to get in? Okay, I've got the grades. I don't have the test scores. Now I got to do some test prep, right? And so you got to figure out all of these things because they all make a difference. They all have an impact. But I'm always stunned at how many people either wing it entirely, and that's why I think the stats that I recited in the open, the out like in no other industry in the world could the outcomes be this horrible and people still like go crazy for it. Like when
Hmm.
70+% of kids graduate with student loan debt, but like 30% of the kids graduate with a job in their major, what the hell's that? Like, it makes no
Right.
sense. But people are still going to these schools with horrific 4-year graduation rates and all of these things. I'm like, look at the retention rate, look at the 4-year graduation rate. You have to look at this data. Don't go there just because you like their football team or their sorority. I listen, I'll be watching the college football playoff tonight. I'm down. I love it. But some families and a lot of parents don't have the guts to say no to their kids. Like it's stunning. It's like, no, just and I think that's why I'm so passionate about it. I mean, this is why I started this company because I want to help families make better decisions on the front end so that they have better options when they come out the other side.
Great. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think what you're also leading another part of the conversation that I think gets overlooked by a ton of people is like the cost of college, right? Like I think your college list at a minimum should include what do you expect you're going to pay and how do you expect you could get scholarships from this place.
Yeah.
I have a friend who went to a public university over a private one when he got into both because the public one's going to be a lot cheaper, and now he's done like just as well in his career as somebody who would have gone to the private college. I think that trade, or it's this one's going to cost you 5 times more and it's like a better bumper sticker. Is that worth it to you? There's, I think, and maybe it is if it's like computer science or engineering or business, but maybe it's not if it's English. So it just depends.
No, and I've got
Yeah.
some anecdotes to share. I mean, I've got like all
Yeah,
these
sure.
war
Go for it.
Number one, when I do a lot of presentations at universities or at high schools, and I get to the topic of cost, and some families be like, "Well, let's just apply and see how it all works out." And I go, "No, no, no. If the budget doesn't fit, don't submit." That's
Hmm.
just it. It's just like it's a really like straightforward thing. It sounds corny, but if the budget doesn't fit, don't submit. Because then what happens? Your kid gets in, it's their dream school, and they don't make retirement loans. So borrowing from your 401k or pulling equity out of your house, that's not a really sound financial strategy. And then when I'm meeting with families, I always ask them, even in the pre-consultation survey that we send to people, we ask them about their savings. Are you all set? Are you 50 to 75%? Are you under 25%? And at some point it's saying, okay, what is the maximum amount of money that you could spend on your kids' college education per year before you have to borrow? Can you tell me
Right.
that number? You'd be amazed at how many people say, I'm not really sure. And like, you have a junior that's going to college in 12 months. Like, when are you going to figure this out? Right. And so I think, and then you talked about the public versus private. I'll give you an example. My own daughter, okay, applied to college a couple of years ago, 11 schools, got into 9. The best ranked school was Michigan. Michigan doesn't give any merit scholarship money. It's 80 grand. She gets into Ohio State, they give her a full 4-year full tuition scholarship.
Right.
So 80 grand, and my out of pocket last year was 1,600. OHIO. Go
Yeah.
Bucks. I mean, plain
Yeah.
and
Suddenly, yeah. No, that totally makes sense. I think it's also just, oh, I think it's easier. It's easy in that case in part because I feel like they're comparable. It definitely gets trickier when they're maybe not, right? If you're choosing between, I don't know, I'm just going to say Stanford and Ohio State. No shade to Ohio State, but just trying to
no,
pick
not none at all.
the
But so
scariest comp.
here's the reality. On the flip side, now I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. The big bumper stickers, there are amazing companies that only recruit from the big bumper stickers. And so
Right.
I will just tell you, I have kids that graduate from UPenn, Wharton School of Business. They're coming out probably making $130 to $150. I have kids
Mhm.
that graduate from Kelly School of Business, which is a great school, IU, and they're playing tomorrow night, right? Most of those kids are making 80 to 90 coming out. So I mean,
Right.
it is a pretty big difference. Now, what are you paying for UPenn? You know, if you're a middle class family and you're getting a boatload of financial aid, you might actually pay less than Indiana, but you got to get into
Mhm.
UPenn, right? So there's so many, I think, moving parts. And I think that's really where the sooner on the front end in the planning stage that you can know all the potential outcomes, you're just going to be able to make a more focused and reasonable decision as you navigate this journey.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, great. Then the next thing I want to talk about, I want to go back to this some of the tactics, right? Or I guess maybe another way of putting it is I want to like now go to the part of the conversation where we talk about how to get into your best fit college. And I think that there's the first thing I just want to go over here is essentially like what are the main levers that you have and maybe what are the misconceptions around that. The first and most obvious lever is like test scores, right? Getting a good standardized test score that's, say, above the average of the school is just going to help you. Um, but a lot of schools nowadays have said that they're test optional. The UC system is test blind. And, I think that there are definitely some times where submitting scores can hurt you, like if you know your scores are way under the average. But just, I guess, what's like the sort of the truth behind test optional in 2026? Is it still truly optional? And is submitting scores going to help you? And how does that depend on where your scores are versus the school?
Chomping at the bit over here, Tyler. Number one, I think test optional is a fallacy. Okay. It is a total fallacy. It should be test preferred. All right.
Mhm.
When school says, hey, 60 to 70% of our kids apply test optional, but they're only about 30 to 35% get in. So basically, 2/3 of the class applies test optional, but 2/3 of the admitted students submitted test scores. What does that tell you? They like a test score. I think California is seeing a massive problem right now. A big story in our industry in the last couple of weeks was coming out of UC San Diego, right? Because they admitted all these kids from under resourced districts that never took a standardized test in high school. They had
Mhm.
straight A's in high school, but they didn't learn anything. Okay. Grade inflation is a massive freaking problem. Okay. And if you have no way to measure, do these kids, I mean, you have kids at UCSD that don't know fractions, literally fractions. I mean, these kids are going into engineering and they're going to wash out. It's a massive problem. And I think, 7 of the 8 Ivy Leagues went back to requiring a test score. MIT went back. A bunch of the schools in the South, Purdue went back. And I think you're going to see that trend continue. And we get it, right? Kids from under-resourced communities might not have access to test prep. Okay. But through Khan Academy and all these other places, there are some tools there. Okay. There are tools there. Our kids last year that went through our prep SAT, they went up on average 150 points. Our best was 350. ACT,
Mhm.
our average was 5 points. Our best was 10. But our kids put in usually around 40 hours of prep. They are taking multiple practice tests. They are sitting for the test 3, 4 times. Okay. Like anything in life, you're not going to get better unless you put it. And these kids haven't been held accountable in high school. Okay. Test optional was an easy way out. And you give kids an easy way out in high school, 90% of them are going to take the easy way out. 90% of them
Mhm.
will. We probably would have back in our day. Okay. So I'm not blaming the kids, but I think the system is doing a disservice right now. And I think we have to hold our kids accountable in the classroom. We can't be afraid to give them C's or D's or B's. Okay. Not like when 70% of the grades at Harvard are A's, you got a bunch of professors that are worried about getting, crappy reviews on ratemyprofessor.com. It's just it's crazy how the standards have continually dropped across the board. Sorry, you can
Yeah.
tell I'm a
Yeah. No,
passionate.
I appreciate the rant, honestly. I agree with you on a lot of those things. I don't know if either of us can solve it necessarily, but I definitely agree with you about just like the fact that essentially we've created a education culture where from I don't know, how do you say this without getting someone mad at me, but just like
Careful,
it's
yeah.
to me
Pick your words
like
wisely, Tyler.
people's feelings are more important than them actually performing. We'll see. We'll see.
I
But
I
yeah,
sound more like my parents back in my day.
no, I know. Well, but
When
yeah,
I
the
was at
fact that like,
Northwestern, Tyler, I tell you a story. So in high school, I didn't have to study very much. Got great grades. I was coasting because I could. Then I got to Northwestern, and my first quarter at Northwestern, I studied more in 3 months than I studied in 4 years of high school. I had no
yeah,
choice. My econ professor had won the Nobel Prize. My philosophy professor was one of the toughest in the country. Like, you didn't have a choice because if you didn't put in the work, you didn't get the grade, plain and simple. I mean, one of my first tests at Northwestern, I studied like for weeks. And the night before the test, I studied 17 hours and I got a C plus. I had never
right,
gotten a B in my life and I got a C plus. And I was like, do I belong at this school? So, but I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to ask the right questions. And so what did I do? I didn't sulk about it, right? I didn't quit. I went in, I met the TA twice a week. I met the professor every other week. And I made sure by that next test, I knew what they were looking for. And then I got an A minus. And then I got an A on the final. And then I got a B plus in the class. And I was like, all right, it sucked. It was really hard,
right.
but getting that C forced me to become a better studier with more study skills, organization, taught me how to ask better questions and to not
Mhm.
procrastinate 100%.
That's great. Awesome. I think it's also just, yeah, if you don't learn that in college, then you're gonna have to learn it in the working world. So it's gonna come for you someday.
If you learn it in
Um,
the working world, you might be on the street looking for a new job.
so let's get back to getting into college tactics. I definitely appreciate your points on tests optional. I think everybody should be looking at tests as an important way to prove that you don't just have a 4.0 because your school's easy. Um, but one of the other things that we already talked about a little bit is like early decision and early action. And I think that obviously the thing that everybody thinks about is like early decision definitely increases your odds of admission because you're giving them a committed person who's going to basically has to go. So that'll really change it if you have a school you love more than all others. Early action still gives you a decent boost, and so I think that everyone understands that it improves your admission odds. However, what I think is maybe missed is like the financial trade-offs and strategic trade-offs. Because I think it's sometimes early decision, early action can like front run some scholarship decisions and things like that might impact what you're doing. So can you talk to us a little bit about like how you advise families to use these tools?
100%. So, number one, every family should know what they can afford beforehand, right? So, if you're going to
Mhm.
go early decision, we will go through that net price calculator and we will know exactly what you're going to pay within a couple $1,000s. We know that school's history for giving scholarships or not. Most schools, they don't give merit to early decision kids because they don't have to, right? Because they know
Mhm.
majority of those kids are either going to qualify for aid or they're going to be full pays, right? So the colleges know that. Let me start with early action, Tyler. For the majority of the schools that have early action, that is also their priority scholarship deadline. All right. So if you don't apply by early action, you could be missing scholarship money. I'm going to give you a story. So one of our students, this is about 7 or 8 years ago, he applies to Indiana Kelley School of Business. He's got a 32 ACT. He gets accepted. He gets $40,000. He applied in October. His next door
Mhm.
neighbor, not in our program, 35 ACT. He was a football player. He said, I'm going to do my apps after the football season. He applied. He
Mhm.
got into Kelley School of Business, 35 ACT. And the dad said, well, how much money did you get? It's like, I don't know. It wasn't in the acceptance letter. So the dad calls up Indiana and says, hey, my neighbor's son with a 32 got 40 grand. How much is my son going to get with a 35? And they go, nothing. And he goes, why? They go, your son missed the deadline. He goes, what do you mean? The deadline's like in January. They go, no, the scholarship deadline was November 1st. And he said, when did my son apply? November 4th. So
Oh,
literally, he missed it by 3 days, and he missed out on anywhere from $40,000 to $50,000. So, moral
jeez.
of the story: know the
Know
priority
your
scholarship,
deadlines.
know the deadlines. Most of those are going to be October 15th or November 1. Most of them, and there's no reason. I mean, most schools you can start applying in August. So our kids, we're working on our essays and apps over the summer. And as soon as the apps open up, we're getting stuff out the door in August. I don't want to wait till October 31st. Why would I do that? One of my rules is no unnecessary stress. Why? Why? Why do we want to do that? Right? If you do want to go early decision, right? Like my alma mater, Northwestern, regular decision, 5% acceptance, early decision, 25%.
Right.
Okay, just do the net price calculator, figure out if you can swing it. And if you can, you'd be remiss if you didn't use that chip because it's going to quadruple or even quintuple your odds. University of
Right.
Miami, early decision, regular decision, 5%, early decision, 50%. So, I mean, these are just crazy numbers. But yeah, I just think most families, they either don't know or they don't understand.
They don't know, they don't understand, and also they just start a little bit too late. And
Yes.
it's deadlines is actually the next thing I wanted to ask about, right? I think that there's one of the things that I wanted to ask about with deadlines. First off, I think you need to build a plan. That's going to be my next question. Is this episode's probably going to come out in kind of like March ish, and so if you were starting in March, how would you build a plan? But before that, I do want to talk about how deadlines can be a leverage point in the admissions process. So, how can deadlines be actually helpful for you? Like, how should, and the different types of deadlines?
Yeah. I mean, I think from a student's perspective, the earlier you apply, typically the earlier you find out. So, they just want to be done. So, applying early action or early decision, you're going to find out earlier. At a lot of schools, it does, the earlier you apply, it does enhance your odds of getting in, right? So that's great. I think from a school standpoint, the challenge is now because of the Common App, they're getting so many applications, even the early ones, the kids are getting deferred because the schools, they're trying to manage their yield rate. So they're protecting their yield rate. They don't have enough staff to read through all the apps by the deadline. And so the poor kids end up getting deferred. And then the other deadline that's also really interesting that most people never talk about, Tyler, is the traditional college decision deadline is May 1st. All right.
Mm.
And so the closer these colleges get to May 1st, if their numbers aren't looking good, like if they don't have enough deposits, guess what they do? They go back to the well and they start giving you more money. So we tell all of our kids, hey, play it cool until April. And then if the school you want is more expensive than a couple of the other schools that gave you more merit scholarship money, we're going to write a financial aid appeal letter. And we're going to go
Mm.
back and I mean, I would say our success rate on those is about 20 or 25%. But if you don't ask, you're never going to get it. Like, my
Yeah.
friend's daughter last year, we wrote a financial aid appeal and the school dropped 10,000 a year. It was 40 grand because we had two other offers from comparable schools. And then that school came back and said, we decided to increase your merit package $10,000 a year. Syracuse last year, they had their noses in the air throughout the admissions process and they deferred a bunch of kids because they thought that they were going to get more full pays. And then they didn't hit their numbers. And so then what did they do? In May, they started pulling kids off the wait list. Okay. Then the kids that they had already accepted but didn't commit, they shot them an email and said, hey, by the way, we have some new scholarship money available. We'd like to offer you $80,000. And the parents are like, 80? Like, oh, well, we were going to go to USC, but now, I mean, we might have to look at Syracuse. So the deadlines, if you've got the guts, I just tell families, first, you got to have the stomach for it. But we like to say, we're playing poker here. Don't show them your cards yet, right? We got to wait till the end because then you might have a little bit extra leverage to go back and ask for more money.
Yeah. That's great. I think that's a great tip. And also, yeah, it leads into my next and final question today, which is just talk holistically about the application timeline. Really, let's say that, again, like you're starting with college junior right now, right? Just walk me through the whole thing from, okay, it's time to start studying for test prep to, all right, it's May of your senior year and let's play poker.
Yep. So I would say, let's say, okay, dream scenario at the latest, we're starting the beginning of junior year. Do you know what you want to major in? Okay. If not, take a career assessment. Let's figure that out. Let's assess your transcript. Let's make sure that, we have the right GPA, weighted and unweighted, and we kind of have a plan for our junior year and senior year courses. Let's assess our resume. Do we have the right activities? What else do we need to do junior year academically and with your extracurriculars? And then how would we leverage the following summer? Testing. I want to get started on that as soon as possible. Beginning of junior year at the latest, take a practice ACT, take a practice SAT, figure out which one you like, and then you should start your prep. Minimum of 20 hours, preferably 40 or more. We want to take at least 3 tests. They're both offered 7 times a year. So pick 3 dates and we map out that testing plan, right? And so I think what we try to do is we go month by month through that junior year. We're vetting the colleges. We're doing some info sessions. We're doing some virtual tours. We're doing some visits. And then the goal is, let's say we start with 20 schools in the beginning of junior year. Now, by the end of junior year, hopefully we've crunched that down to around a dozen, plus or minus. Okay. And then once that school year is over in May or June, wherever you guys live, we are doing the Common App personal statement in June. We're getting that sucker done. Put that done. The Common App opens up on July 1st now. We're doing a rough draft of your Common App in July. We're getting 90% of it built in July. Then in July, we're starting the supplemental essays. We will have a schedule from the middle of July through the end of September. All of your essays, boom, boom, boom. Every week, you should have a couple essays done every single week. If you stick to that schedule, 90% of your work is going to be done by the time you go back to school. Ideally, with our students, we want to have everything out the door end of September, early October. We want to have a little bit of buffer because the southern schools will have an October 15th deadline, many of them. Most of the schools will have November 1st. The UCs, the California schools will have December 1st. But we get that stuff done early. Then once October hits, we're doing FAFSA, we're doing the CSS profile. So we're working on our need-based aid. And then once that's out the door, then we're looking at scholarships. And we are doing everything we can because some schools, like I was looking with the student yesterday at a scholarship at UNC Chapel Hill. The scholarship, you have to write 6 essays for that scholarship. You can't write 6 essays in 2 nights. You got to
Right.
be doing this, right? You don't want, if it's due December 1st, you don't want to start it Thanksgiving weekend, right? You want to get a jump start. So then basically you get all the apps done, you get the financial aid, you get the scholarships done, then you got to wait. And that's the toughest part, is kind of the waiting game. You're going to start getting some notifications typically like in December. You might not hear back from all the schools until end of March. Then you say, okay, now prestige, money. Yeah, got to talk about it as a family. Hopefully you can do a few admitted students days, narrow it. I mean, maybe you have a favorite and you're done and you send in your housing deposit, or you play a little poker there at the end and see if you can wrangle out a few more dollars. And then by May 1st, hopefully, good Lord willing, everything works out the way you wanted it to. But then here comes the kicker. Last year, Tyler, we had more kids get off of wait lists than in the previous 10 years combined. So just when you
Wow.
think it's over, it might not be over, because all of these selective schools that were banking on all these foreign enrollments and stuff, they didn't show up. So then guess what? Hey, Vanderbilt, I got a spot. Hey, Cornell, I got a spot. I mean, we had kids get off of so many wait lists last year. I had one girl get off the Northwestern wait list in the middle of August. She was 1 week away from enrolling at a different school, and Northwestern called and said, we got a spot if you want it.
Yeah.
Just, no, it is just when you think it's over, it might not be over. So I just tell people, just buckle up for the long haul. But I think if you have a month by month calendar starting junior year, kind of going through graduation, there's just a lot more security, a lot more calm. The calendar's not always exact. Things might slide a little bit, but if you have it roughed out, because if you let the kids do it, they're going to procrastinate till the last minute. That's just a fact of life.
Mm-hmm.
And when the kids and the parents, they all butt heads because the kids think parents are always nagging them. And the reality, families are very emotionally invested in this process, and nerves can tend to become frayed. But I think when you prepare and you put in the work, it's a lot more calm, and I think you're definitely going to hopefully drive to some more successful outcomes at the end.
Great. Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. This has been Shift, a college admissions podcast for a changing world, hosted by Tyler from Achievable with Kevin Krebs from HelloCollege. You can get a free trial of Achievable's ACT and CLT courses by going to achievable.me.